Okay, so let's do the questions for tonight. So let's see what we have here. Okay, number one. I have been given to understand that there are 4 types of practitioner, or rather 4 ways where one can get awakening. Samatha, then vipassana, samatha and vipassana together, vipassana and then samatha, and none of the above 3. You mentioned only samatha and vipassana. What about the rest? None of the above. And e.g. is Sariputta. Okay, thank you. Please correct my understanding if wrong. Okay, so this is a sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, and this is where Venerable Ananda is speaking this particular sutta, and that is where you have this kind of division of the path in this particular way. But the point is that even though you can have a certain degree of one thing over another, remember it's only a matter of degrees. If you do practice samatha in the right way, then there will also be a degree of vipassana there. Even if you focus on a samatha practice, it is impossible that you cannot have vipassana as well at the same time. If you focus on the vipassana side of things, then also there must be a degree of samatha happening at that time. These things are not impossible to separate completely. It's just a matter of emphasis here. It also depends on what you mean by vipassana practice in these particular cases. Very often what it probably means is a focus on certain perceptions of impermanence, death contemplation, that kind of thing. But remember, if you do a death contemplation in the right way, it reduces the defilements, right? Because you're thinking about death, you're abandoning your desires for this world, abandoning any kind of negativity you may have about this world. And because you're doing that, when the defilements go down, you will become more peaceful as well, right? Is it possible to not become more peaceful if the defilements go down? So regardless of what you do, you're going to be, the defilements will decrease, and for that reason there will be more vipassana and there will be more samatha. It's just the nature of how these things work. So even if you focus on one thing, they will tend to go down, they will tend to kind of arise together, so to speak. Okay, so I hope that kind of makes sense. If not, then, well, that's... Okay, let's go on to the next one. Dear Ajahn, how to bring back someone in darkness to light? How do you measure you are meditating right, and how long period to get the first jhana? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay. Okay, so how to bring back someone in darkness to light? And the answer to that one is that sometimes it is not up to us whether somebody can be brought back from darkness into light again, because very often it depends on that person, it depends on their willingness and their desire to do these things. And if they don't want to be bothered, they don't want to have any desire to be brought back into the light side of things again, then of course it is very difficult. It is like somebody who is smoking or somebody who is drinking very heavily. How are you going to make them stop do those things? Well, the first thing you have to do is to motivate them to actually want to stop. If somebody doesn't want to stop, it's just impossible for that to happen. So you have to motivate this person, right, to bring them back from darkness to the light again. And once they are motivated, then often it is possible to do that. And I always think that, as I said before, the best way to motivate anyone to do anything in this world is just to be a good example yourself. When other people see the happiness that you have, or that you see that something is going well in your life, then very often they will realize there's something important there for them also to move towards. That is often, I think, the most powerful way of doing this. Otherwise, if you just pressure people too much, it often is not going to happen. So Yeah, it is. These things are often very difficult, and because they are difficult, sometimes we just try a little bit to try our best, and then we have to be ready to let go if it doesn't work out. Because sometimes you just can't do anything. That is part of the problem. How do you measure if you are meditating right, and how long period to get the first jhana? Okay, well. The answer to that is how you measure is how you feel after the meditation, right? Sometimes you come out afterwards and you feel, at the very least, you feel more relaxed. Hopefully you feel a bit more mindful as well. Hopefully you feel a bit more at ease. And if it is different after you come out than when you started, if there are more good qualities when you come out than when you began, then you know that your meditation is roughly right. If you do your meditation and afterwards you feel really confused or really angry or something like that, that's not a very good sign that you're doing things in the right way. So check out your mind. This is one of the things about when I say at the end of the meditation to review your meditation, is to first of all feel what does the mind feel like now compared to when I started. Right? And if you see that the mind is feeling better in a certain way, more at ease, more relaxed, more mindful, and these kind of things, then you try to understand why is that the case. And what you will see is that there is a certain thing that you are doing in this practice that make you feel more at ease. One of the things that you're doing is letting go. You're just allowing things to be. Right? So feel that process of allowing things to be, just sitting back, not involving yourself, not pushing yourself around. And as you see how that works, you start to be able to do a similar kind of practice in the future. Just allowing things to be, just relaxing. Sometimes that means you fall asleep, sometimes it means all kinds of things. But that's okay, don't worry so much about that. Occasionally it will work well, and then you understand how this process works. Another thing that you will see when the meditation works is that your perception of the world becomes more relaxed, more at ease, more positive. You're getting into this thing that I call right attitude in meditation. You see other people in a positive light, you see yourself in a positive light. And just by thinking some kind thoughts about people around you, seeing how fortunate you are to be surrounded by good company, other people who are like-minded, in a good place, and all of these kind of things. So this is how you measure the meditation. So how long do you have to get into the first jhana? It's not really about how long, because sometimes you can sit on your backside for now until eternity and still you don't get into first jhana, right? So it is all about these other things that you have to do. It's all about the qualities of your mind. It's about all the preparations you have done. That's why I have emphasized so much on this retreat about getting your sila okay, getting your mind states in the right place. If you get all of those things in the right place, then there is some chance you will get into samadhi as a consequence. If they are not already there, there is no way that you're going to get there, no matter how long you sit. So basically, you will know when you are ready to move into first jhana. You will know because the mind is becoming very beautiful at that point. Lots of happiness in the mind, lots of piti, lots of gladness coursing through the body, a lot of tranquility and peace, right? All of these things come before you even get to the first jhana. So if you haven't got those yet, you still have a long way to go on the path. If you're starting to get there, great, you're really on the right track. And I will have another look at one more sutta, hopefully tomorrow. Tomorrow is the last day already. Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? One more sutta, I promise to go through that one, because a very beautiful sutta that expresses the path of meditation, how you are supposed to experience it personally, right? And it points it out in a very nice way. So I'll have a look at that tomorrow, hopefully. Okay. Is it possible to make communism work if we promote values which the Sangha has for the society? Is it possible to make communism work if we promote values which the Sangha has for the society? I think communism, this is kind of getting into the politics and things, but is it possible? I think the problem with communism is that it is a very kind of high ideal, and of course, these are the kind of ideals that people sometimes create, but they are mental creations, and whether they actually work in practice is a very, very different thing. And I think the problem with many of these ideals, it assumes certain aspects in the human character. It assumes that people are good, it assumes that people are rational, it assumes all of these kind of things about human beings. And the question is, are those basic assumptions about human beings, are they correct? And if they are not correct, are these idealistic, these kind of these ideals, are they possible to kind of live up to? Can a society work on this basis without, if human beings aren't the way they, that actually is assumed in these kind of utopian ideals, right? And I think a lot of these utopian idealist societies, they cannot exist precisely because human beings don't have the qualities that are assumed there. Often it's assumed that people are kind of kind, right? That they don't take advantage of somebody else. The problem is that in society, in people, when you have greed, when you have hatred, when you have delusion, people are always going to take advantage of the situation. And this is why I think communism didn't work very well in China, it didn't work in Russia. It has never really worked anywhere, it seems. And not because for lack of trying, but simply because human nature isn't made for these kind of systems. And I think that is the problem. And I think capitalism as well. We live in a kind of capitalist society where everybody is greedy. And even that society is being undermined by human greed and human stupidity and all these things all the time. It's another kind of ideal which I think doesn't really work. So I think any kind of ideal, any kind of utopian system, I think is bound to fail. Utopian systems don't work because they get undermined by human defilements at every possible stage. Humans want to take advantage of these systems, and they will always find a way of taking advantage, right? This is just the nature of human beings. Undermine democracy, undermine the communist ideals, undermine capitalism, whatever kind of institution you put into place is going to be undermined by human defilements. So we always have to react, we always have to try to counter the human defilements and change society, and there's no end to that. There is no final ideal society as far as I can see here. E.g., the Sangha generally shares what they have, are contented, high integrity, to be not easy to bribe, etc. Well, the thing is that the Sangha is a voluntary organization. You go there because you want to be there, and that is why it works. Normally, it normally works, but even then it doesn't always work, right? So it's voluntary, but in communism it's not voluntary, it's kind of a top-down system. It's placed on top of you, and then you have to conform to those ideals. The communism I am referring to is sharing resources to all humans to eliminate poverty and inequality. It can also enable robots to do most of the work, and majority of humans will be unemployed and not need to work. Humans can then work for passion, fun, and to contribute to humanity, or become full-time meditators. Sounds good, it sounds very nice, and it sounds great. Whether it is actually possible or not, I must admit, I'm somewhat skeptical of all utopian ideals, having seen how they always fail, having seen human nature doesn't really allow utopian ideals. And this is one of the problems with society, I think, and one of the problems that eventually want you to give up on the world, and you want to become a monk or a nun instead, because there's no end to the if there is no stable society, even that you always have to react, you always have to be prepared to change, you're always kind of slightly behind, right? Society is already changing, the world is changing, and then you have to change the rules after the fact at all times. There is no end to that. You're always playing catch-up, always trying to reach kind of the perfect state, never actually getting there. So that is my take. And this is one of those tiring things about society, the fact that you cannot ever reach a perfect society. You're always kind of moving towards it, never actually getting there, sometimes moving backwards, sometimes moving forwards. And eventually you realize there is no solution in that realm. So it seems to me anyway. Dear Ajahn, thank you very much for your inspiring teaching. Just for your information, Samadhi is translated to ding, ding in Mandarin. Is that right? Ding in Mandarin, which has a similar meaning to stillness. That's right. Okay, yeah. I've heard Ajahn Brahm said that once, and he was very happy with that when he heard that. He likes the idea of... How do you pronounce it again? Ding, ding, ding. Okay. Okay. Good. That's very, very good of you to remind us of that. Dear Ajahn, most teachers teach Satipatthana using Digha Nikaya and Majjhima Nikaya. There is also a lot of suttas about Satipatthana in Samyutta Nikaya. Exactly. Samyutta Nikaya 47, but not much mentioned. Why is this so? Yeah, it's a very good question, and I think very, very relevant question. And this is precisely why I said so many of the things I said earlier on, because people tend to forget that Satipatthana is much, much more than the Satipatthana Sutta. Satipatthana is only one small aspect of Satipatthana, and then you have the whole Samyutta Nikaya, the Satipatthana Samyutta, full of Satipatthana Suttas, and that is all kind of put aside, and instead you bring forth the Satipatthana Sutta every time and only focus on that one. And I think this is one of the reasons why we have such a slanted and kind of biased idea of what Satipatthana is about, because we look at the Satipatthana Sutta in isolation and we forget the big picture of the suttas. I think this is a big weakness actually of the whole kind of Satipatthana cult, and that's almost what it is. It's like Satipatthana Sutta is the most important one. Just recite this one every day and then you will be kind of happy if you do that or whatever. So I think this is a very important point. And why I think is because somehow this is like a fashion. The fashion is that this is the important sutta. Certain important people have perhaps said that or tried to hint at that, and because that has happened, then suddenly it has flourished in this particular way, and people have forgot to read the entire Nikayas, and in particular the Satipatthana Samyutta. And of course the problem with that is, as I mentioned before, that the Satipatthana Sutta itself very likely is one of those suttas in the Pali Nikayas that has been changed quite a lot over the millennia since the time of the Buddha. And because there has been changes to it, it is perhaps not the most reliable source for understanding what Satipatthana is about. It can still be used, but it should definitely be used in conjunction with these other suttas. And that is when you start to get the overview. So I suggest it's just one of those fashions, right? And people fall into fashions, and then we get stuck with those for a while. And next life, then, or next time around, then it's going to be a different fashion. You have to look out for that fashion instead. And so it goes, right, back and forth from fashion to fashion. So again, when I say these things, I certainly don't mean to blame anybody, because everybody tends to want to try their best to support Buddhism and to keep the Dhamma in the right way. When people do these things and they kind of add things and they emphasize certain things, and I make that mistake, no doubt myself as well, it is well-intentioned. You're trying your very best. It's just that it's inherent in human beings that we tend to be biased. It's inherent that we don't see the whole picture. It's inherent that we're going to make mistakes like that. And for that reason, it is such a liberating thing to read the suttas yourself sometimes and get a view of what's going on and try to understand. And one of the first things I noticed when I started reading the suttas, because you hear about all these vipassana techniques, right? And occasionally people saying bad things about samadhi. The first thing I saw, it's very easy to see when you start reading the suttas, is that samadhi and jhana is mentioned everywhere, right? How can it be optional? How can it not be necessary if the Buddha talks about it in every other sutta, actually more than every other sutta almost? It's absolutely packed with samadhi and jhanas everywhere. And this is the first thing. It doesn't match, right? And of course, a lot of that comes from a very strong focus on things like the Satipatthana Sutta to the exclusion of almost everything else. And that is where the entire focus is. So sometimes when you read the suttas, you see statements for yourself that are incredibly useful, that give you a guide to what the suttas are about. Of course, it's also important not to overestimate one's own ability to read the suttas. Sometimes you hear people having some really crazy opinions about the suttas. And in those cases, it's probably better to listen to an experienced teacher here. So it's a mixture of listening to an experienced teacher and kind of investigating these things for yourself. Okay, dear Ajahn, how do I ignite metta in my meditation? Whenever I recite the Metta Sutta, I don't feel anything. I can't feel anything. Please advise. Thank you. So it is not so easy to ignite the metta, right? It is one of those things that actually many people have difficulties with. And that's why I usually prefer to just do a peaceful meditation, try to find some peace and some happiness that way. And metta takes a lot of preparation for you to be able to really ignite that metta. And of course, as I was saying yesterday, a lot of that foundation is to do metta actions and metta by word and metta by thought in your daily life, right? Remember the sutta I was reading yesterday, the Kosambhya Sutta, is all about starting with the basics first of all. In other words, be kind, think kind thoughts about the people around you. How can I do something kind? Well, somebody has given me a nice cup of apple juice, right? That was very, very kind, and I really appreciate that. So I'm going to have a bit of apple juice now. So little things like that. Look after each other. But you don't just look after me because I'm a monk. You look after everybody. People below you, people above you, people who are equal to you. And when we do that, we create a beautiful and harmonious society, and you also create the spark of metta inside of you, which then will ignite later on when you try the metta meditation. So start with the foundations. Keep on practicing those. That is where the real problem lies, right? And then when you sit down later on and you chant the Metta Sutta, or you try to do the metta, right? You sit down and you just think, may all beings be happy. And you really mean that. The problem is we don't really mean it. But when you really mean, may all beings be happy and well, it is a very beautiful feeling that comes with that, because you actually wish everybody in the whole world, you actually really wish them happiness. But of course, to do that, you have to have a degree of purity beforehand, otherwise it doesn't work. So this is really what it's all about. So just keep on trying, right? Do a bit in your meditation, do a little bit in daily life, and eventually, if you keep on trying, keep on investigating at the same time, why doesn't it work? What is stopping you? And then gradually you get there. If you want to do metta meditation at home, I would recommend you to get a nice recording of a guided metta meditation. Your favorite teacher, whoever that is, who does a nice kind of puts you in the right mood. The hard thing is often getting in the right mood. If you have a nice voice, somebody you trust, somebody you know is doing the right thing, and they are talking, and you listen to that, it can draw you into the right mood incredibly quickly here. It's very powerful when you hear somebody else who has the right qualities. It can draw you into meditation so fast. I know this for myself. Sometimes when you go to the main hall at Bodhinyana Monastery in Perth, the main hall there is a very beautiful hall. You go inside and you feel peaceful almost straight away if you've been there. And then you get Ajahn Brahm coming out. He gives you a teaching. And sometime when Ajahn Brahm on some of his days, you feel the peace, right? And it kind of bores into you. And then afterwards you feel, wow, that is really, really cool. And you just feel like sitting there. You don't want to do anything else afterwards. And this is the ability of a person with the right qualities to kind of calm you down and kind of feel the peace almost emanating from the other person. So find that kind of recording, and when you find that, you can almost meditate in any place, even when it is as noisy as it is outside here, right? Even then you can actually meditate. And you can meditate at home and wherever it is. Okay. Venerable Ajahn, can monks really give blessings? As for the time of sickness, etc. What sutta monks chant before and after the dana meals? What sutta monks chant for sickness, blessing and dwellings, etc.? What sutta monks chant at funeral? How does the chanting help? Thank you. It's a good question. It's not a lot of the chanting we do these days, I must admit, I'm not sure how much it helps, to be honest with you. A lot of the chanting is just a tradition, it's what people have been doing for a long time, and we keep on doing this. Sometimes we have monks chanting all night, and after a while, your whole life as a monk is spent doing chanting. That's all you do as a monk, giving blessings here and there, all this kind of stuff. And I think we do too much chanting, to be honest. One of the best things about chanting, one of the great things is to actually understand what the chanting is about, right? Like the Metta Sutta, know the words, know what it means. And actually, when you know what it means, it tends to draw you in much more, and you start to feel the power of that sutta much more if you understand what it is about. Right? You chant all these beautiful words about being contented and easily satisfied, having metta for the whole world, may all beings be safe and happy, and these kind of things. And when you do chant that, and you have a feeling it comes from the Buddha, sometimes it penetrates inside, and it actually really has some power to it. So understanding the words is one of the most, I think, important things of the chanting. You can also use chanting if you feel, for example, you come back home after a long day and you want to calm down a little bit, you want to relax a little bit, and you find that chanting makes you peaceful and relaxed. You can listen to chanting for that reason, right? Simply to make you peaceful and relaxed, even if you don't understand the meaning. So these are a couple of ways when the chanting definitely has a good effect on people. No doubts about that. So in the suttas, to give you an example of chanting from the suttas, it's not really chanting at all. In the suttas, it's mostly about blessing. So, about understanding the sutta. So one of the classical suttas that is recited in the suttas is the sutta we were talking about the other day, the Bojjhanga Sutta, where you chant the Bojjhangas if somebody is sick, right? And according to these suttas, when the Bojjhangas were chanted even to arahants afterwards, they were fine, they were good. But that, I think, has much more to do with actually understanding the content of these things and being inspired by the content, and that inspiration kind of lifts you up and then kind of destroys almost the illness on the spot. And of course, this is the point at the time of the Buddha, everybody understood what was going on. Every recitation, I don't think they did chanting at all, but they did recitation of the suttas. It all had meaning, and that is why it had so much power, I think, at that time. So, the suttas the monks chant before and after the dana meal, this chanting there is about sharing with your ancestors. Ito dinang petanang upakapati means may the petas, the departed, share of this what I'm giving. That's literally what it means. So he's just saying, this is sharing with the petas, with the departed people. And then there's something in there about, it's just the law of karma that is being recited really. And it's saying that to honor the elders, how does it go again? Buddha Pachayano, right, as part of that chant. Buddha Pachayano means to honor the elders, and something about sila in there as well. And then it ends up with saying that if you do all of these things, then you increase in ayuvano sukhang balang, in long life, happiness, strength, and ayu and happiness, strength, long life. What I've forgotten there? Ayuvano sukhang balang. And beauty, right? So you increase in all of these things, right? So it's basically telling you these are the things you should be doing, and this is the result. So they are just teachings, really, Buddhist teachings, and they are meant to be inspiring, and that's kind of what is behind that. That is the meal chant, and then there is even further down. The further meal chant is about all the power of all the Buddhas. May they help you, and that stuff is much later. It's got nothing to do with the word of the Buddha at all. And then for the sickness, you use the chanting of the Bojjhangas. And funeral chants, usually funeral chants is what is called the Abhidhamma Matika, which is the summary of the Abhidhamma found in the Dhammasangani, the first book of the Abhidhamma. And that is what usually people chant at the funeral chants. In Perth, we don't do that. In Perth, we chant the Metta Sutta at funerals to share the metta with the departed and that sort of thing here. So that those are the chants and the blessing for dwellings. The chant we use there is usually the Jayanto Bodhiyamule, victory at the root of the Bodhi tree, talking about the Buddha's attaining of awakening at the root of the Bodhi tree here. So there you are. This is how I see the chanting work. A lot of chanting is done just because it is tradition, for no other reason whatsoever. And I would say it's much better to try to get some understanding for these things and use them in a skillful way rather than just do things for traditional purposes. But even if it makes you feel good, it makes you feel relaxed, that is already good enough reason to use it. Dear Ajahn, upon the Buddha's enlightenment, he completely understood and comprehended the Four Noble Truths. We also know that Buddha has the power to see his past lives, like as Jyotipala during Buddha Kassapa. My question is, which one comes first, the Four Noble Truths or seeing the past lives? Thank you, Ajahn. Okay, so the point here is that there are different ways of understanding the idea of rebirth. The idea of rebirth can be understood by recalling your past lives. If you remember your past lives, then of course you know that there are past lives. But there is another way of understanding rebirth, and that is by actually comprehending the Four Noble Truths. One of the things that you understand when you comprehend Four Noble Truths is the second Noble Truth, which is that craving gives rise to suffering. Craving, which is rebirth producing, gives rise to suffering in the future. So part of what you're understanding here is how craving drives samsara onwards in the future. How consciousness cannot stop when you die, but must continue. There's a projection of consciousness into the future because of the desire that actually has to do with the future. And you also understand the opposite. You understand that when that craving is completely gone, consciousness itself must stop when you die, because that force which drives it forward has actually ceased completely. And you see that when you become a stream enterer already. You don't even have to become an arahant. When you become a stream enterer, you know that. So any stream enterer knows about the reality of rebirth, because they know that consciousness cannot stop when you die, because craving is there to drive it forward into the future. So that is really what it is all about. So you don't actually have to remember your past lives. There's these two different ways of doing it. Sometimes you can become a full arahant and without actually remembering any past lives at all. But still, you have the knowledge about these things. Okay. Dear Ajahn, this is an awakening journey of self-healing. Insomnia disappear, constipation disappear, body joint pains disappear. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us rephrase to 2000 Sutta meditation and self-healing retreat with Ajahn Brahmali. We bow down low before you, Bhante. Thank you very much. Okay, that's very nice to hear. At least one customer very, very happy, very pleased customer. That's what a wonderful thing that is. Okay, so keep on practicing, and then you get even more benefits in the future, right? This is only the beginning. So maybe other things will also disappear, like the defilements. That's even more important down the road. Okay, dear Ajahn, under Anguttara 766, the 7 suns, conditioned phenomena are impermanent. Kindly elaborate in particular what is conditioned phenomena? Sadhu times 3. Okay, what are conditioned phenomena? It may be easy to say what is not conditioned phenomena, right? Because pretty much everything is conditioned phenomena. Conditioned phenomena just means something that has been brought into existence because of other phenomena, something which is not independent in the world. Anything which is not independent, which arises because of other thing, that is a conditioned phenomenon. Yeah, so you can start asking yourself, is there anything in this world which is not arisen because of other conditions? And you start to realize it's very hard to find anything which has not arisen because of other things. Almost everything has has come about this way. The easiest way to understand this is to look just at your own experience, your own conscious experience, your own awareness of what is happening. There's no need to think of the world kind of out there. In the end, everything is really personal experience. Everything that matters to you is your personal experience. So just look at your personal experience. Okay, you see things, yeah? You hear things, you smell things. This is our personal experience. What actually goes on inside of our heads, right? Or our hearts, if you like. That is our personal experience. And then ask yourself about your personal experience. Is it always changing? Yes, right? Always changing, never really stable. Except perhaps if you go into a state of samadhi and you stay there for a while, then it is a little bit stable. But usually during waking hours, it is always changing, always new things happening to us, constantly. And that is how you can understand the conditioned phenomena. Your personal experience of the world, that is conditioned phenomena. And you can see it's conditioned. Always changing. It depends on what you attend to. If you attend to A, you see one thing, and you shift your attention to something else, then of course it is changed already. You're seeing something else. So one of the conditions that decides what is happening is your attention to the world outside you. Another thing is what is available. There are only certain amounts of things that are available. I'm sitting in this room. I cannot see what's happening in that room. I cannot see what's happening outside. So there is a limit to what you can experience. So that is the other thing that matters, right? Then it depends on whether you're attending to the ear or to the eyes and all these kind of things. And all of these things together is what gives rise to the idea of all of these things are conditioned phenomena, and they're all dependent on other things. That's why they're called conditioned. So once you see this, you start to realize that there isn't really anything in this world that is stable, and everything is conditioned phenomena, and because of that, you kind of get ready to give up all of those things. They are conditioned. It means you can't control them. Because you can't control them, but you are attached to them, you will suffer. Right? And because you can't control them, and because they are suffering, and because they are permanent, they are also non-self. They're not solid entities that are always there for when you need them. So that is conditioned phenomena for you. Everything basically is conditioned phenomena. It is there isn't really anything apart from that. So I hope that makes sense. If not, try again, and we'll see if we can answer these things tomorrow. You can also ask now if you like, if you feel. Dear Ajahn, please elaborate a bit more on how we can be a refuge unto ourselves, how we can be our own protector, have mastery of our lives, not be duped. Indeed, not be duped. Who is the main duper in your life? You know that? Who is the main duper in your life? The Buddha is the kind of the main anti-duper. And the main duper in your life is the defilements, right? The defilements are there. They are the ones who dupe you all the time. And this is the main problem. So how can you be a refuge unto ourselves? And really it is, I suppose, to a very large extent, you have to rely on some personal assistance. One of the things that the Buddha is always talking about is the incredible importance of the Kalyana Mitta, right? Always going back to those people in the world who support you, who help you practice in the right way, who make you understand the Dhamma in the right way. All of these things. You have to rely on that to some extent. And I don't know if you were here in the beginning, but I was basically saying to people a lot, and I always say this a lot, is that we always need to have a lot of input in our life, spiritual input from people we trust, people we assume have some understanding of the spiritual path. The Buddha is number one, and secondary after the Buddha comes other teachers, right? Who you feel you have some trust in. And listen to those teachings to keep you on the right track, keep reminding you of what is important in life. It is so easy in ordinary life when we are busy, when you go to work, when you have a family, when you have so many things to do, a long to-do list, right? And you keep crossing things off, and every time you cross one thing off, 2 new things come onto the list. That is a problem with some of these to-do lists. And then you need some kind of refuge from all of that. You need something to remind you of what is important in life. And that is where the Kalyana Mitta comes in. And because we are like these ships without any rudder, that Kalyana Mitta becomes 100% of the spiritual life. So remember that. Remember that you get that regular input of spiritual teachings that keep you going on the right way, down the right track. Not too much. Maybe this retreat may be too much, I don't know, 4 hours, 5 hours every day. It's a lot, right? After a while, your head spins with all these Dhamma teachings. You don't know. So not too much, not kind of just listening for the sake of listening, but listening for the sake of being inspired, for actually keeping you doing the right thing. This is one of those very important things. So this, in a sense, is actually how, strange as it may sound, this is how you become a refuge for yourself, because you get the resources that enable you to practice in the right way. When you are kind to the world around you, then you become a refuge unto yourself. Because when you are kind to other people around you, and you don't allow the defilements to take charge, but you allow the Dhamma to take charge in your life, then you're always building yourself up, always helping yourself, improving yourself, feeling better about yourself. Simple things like that, being kind, Kalyana Mitta, 2 kind of very crucial words. If you remember those 2 things, you're going to go a very long way on the Buddhist path. Of course, the real refuge onto yourself really only happens when you gain meditation, when you gain some deep stillness in the mind. Then you start to feel independent inside of yourself. You start to feel that the world outside can no longer touch you. You start to feel the strength of being able to be independent of other beings and people. And this is one of the things that you can see in those people who practice the path a very long way. They tend to be incredibly independent people, be unafraid of doing things their own way, not be concerned about what the rest of the people say. It says in the sutras, it says that you become independent of other people in the Buddha's dispensation because you have the Dhamma in your heart. You no longer rely on other people outside of you. That's when you really become the refuge unto yourself. And in the meantime, you have to rely on that Dhamma input to keep you going down the right track. So take responsibility for yourself. Know that in the end you are the one who has to live your life well. Nobody outside can really force you to do that. And then when you do that, when you take responsibility and you listen to the right teachings, then over time, whoa, you're going to go down in the right way here. Okay, last question for tonight. Bhante, what is your take on hypnosis? A friend of mine and her aunt went shopping. While at the restroom, her aunt was hypnotized by another elderly lady, a con woman. Fortunately, my friend went in to find her aunt, and after some time of calling out her aunt's name, her aunt snapped out of her daze, but her aunt has no recollection of that daze. Okay, so that sounds strange. I never heard of anyone being hypnotized in a shopping center before, or whatever it is. I think definitely hypnosis works, and I think there's plenty of evidence for that. There's no doubt that it works, and people can be made to do really embarrassing things while they're under hypnosis. That is, if Ajahn Brahm has some famous stories about hypnosis, of course. He has funny stories about pretty much everything, and hypnosis included. So it can happen, and it can be done, and it can be used both for good or for bad. But you have to be a bit suggestible as a person to be hypnotized. Not everybody can be hypnotized, but certain people can be hypnotized. Some of the most interesting kind of hypnosis is the hypnosis when people do past life regressions. A lot of that hypnosis is very dodgy. It doesn't really give any real results. All you do is imagine things. You don't actually really recall any past lives. But occasionally you have these people who recall a past life, and it's actually real, right? You go into hypnosis, you remember something very strange, and it actually happens to be a real past life. And they know that because you can often check the details in like official records if these people actually existed and that sort of thing. And I know at least one person who seems to have had a very clear recollection of a past life. And then hypnosis is really interesting. And then it can really be life-changing, because if you actually really feel that you have seen a past life and you see the consequences of that, it can actually have very powerful effects on your Dhamma practice. And there's one person I know who did this. He almost ended up becoming a monk after he saw his past life, because he was horrified by this idea that he had existed before. Before that, he didn't believe in past lives at all, and then he had to come to terms with this, and he actually had to realize that he had existed in the past, and it changed his whole outlook, his whole way of living, everything, whoa, bang, right? Because it was so different. That's the kind of hypnosis I like. The other stuff is maybe a bit entertaining, but a lot of the time just a waste of time, right? It's not really all that useful at all, I reckon anyway. I'm a bit of a killjoy, but there there you are. So just do whatever you do if you enjoy it. Okay, wonderful, very good. So have a good night, sleep well, have a nice dinner, and we'll see you again tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Is that right? Yeah, okay, so 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Am I supposed to walk for the procession of relics as well, or up to me? Okay, in case I will not go. Am I? Is that okay? Are you sure? I'm happy to oblige if that's if necessary. But so you can. Okay, ask Dr. Sri, and if he says I should come, I will happy to come. If he doesn't say I don't have to come, I'm happy to stay in my room. So yeah. Very good. Okay, see you tomorrow.